My granddaughter grabbed my sleeve in the parking lot of the grocery store, and the look on her face stopped me cold. She was 9 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness, and she almost never cried. But that afternoon, standing between two shopping carts in the superstore parking lot in Sudbury, her chin was trembling. "Grandpa," she whispered, "we can't go home." I heard something. I looked around. It was a Tuesday. The sky was the color of old dishwater. A woman was loading bags into a minivan 2 spots over. Everything looked ordinary. Everything felt wrong. "What did you hear, sweetheart?" She glanced toward my truck. "Not here? Can we sit inside?" We sat in the cab with the doors locked. The heater ticked. She kept looking at the rearview mirror, even though she couldn't see anything in it from where she sat. I waited. With Hazel, you always waited. She processed things carefully, like her grandmother used to. My wife, Lorraine, had passed 3 years earlier. Pancreatic cancer. 16 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After 41 years of marriage, I was alone in the house we'd built together on Elm Ridge Road, and my son-in-law had been making himself very comfortable with that fact. "I was in the basement getting my skates," Hazel said finally. The door to the laundry room was open. I could hear Dad and Uncle Terry on the deck. Terry, my son-in-law's older brother, a man who had once borrowed $400 from me at a Christmas dinner and never mentioned it again. What were they saying? She picked at a thread on her mitten. "Dad said your name?" "He said the old man won't fight it, he doesn't have the energy." And Uncle Terry said something about a lawyer, about getting someone to look at the paperwork before spring. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not panic. Not yet, just a kind of quiet dread the way the air feels before a bad storm rolls in off the lake. "Is that all you heard?" "No." She looked at me then, and I could see she'd been carrying this for days, maybe longer. Uncle Terry said, "Just make sure Cynthia keeps him busy." And then Dad laughed. Cynthia was my daughter. I put the truck in reverse and I sat there with my foot on the brake, and I didn't move for a long time. My name is Donald Pierce. I'm 68 years old. I spent 34 years as a millwright at the Falconbridge smelter, and when I retired, I took my pension and my savings, and I put them into what Lorraine and I had always planned. A modest RRSP, some GICs at the credit union, and the house on Elm Ridge Road, which was paid off, worth somewhere around $410,000 by the time Lorraine died. That house was everything. We'd poured our lives into it. The kitchen addition we'd built ourselves over 2 summers. The garden she'd planted along the south fence. The workshop in the back where I still spent most mornings. My daughter, Cynthia, and her husband, Brad, lived 40 minutes away in Hanmer. Brad worked in commercial property management. He had a good eye for opportunity, as he liked to say. He also had a habit of talking over people at dinner and calling Lorraine Mom, even though she'd asked him not to. Their daughter Hazel spent every other weekend at my place. It was our arrangement, and it was the best part of my week. She'd help me in the workshop, ask questions about how things worked, eat 2 bowls of cereal for breakfast, and watch old nature documentaries with me on Saturday nights. Brad had been polite enough in the years while Lorraine was alive. After she died, something shifted. Small things at first. He started showing up unannounced, walking through the house with this appraising look, like he was taking inventory. He suggested, more than once, that a man my age didn't need a 4-bedroom house. He forwarded me articles about retirement communities in Barrie and New Liskeard. I ignored it. I thought it was just Brad being Brad. I was wrong. After Hazel told me what she'd heard, I didn't go home right away. I drove to a Tim Hortons on the edge of town and ordered 2 hot chocolates, and I let her talk. She told me everything she remembered, word for word, the way kids do when they've been rehearsing something in their head because they're afraid of getting it wrong. Terry had asked about power of attorney. Brad had said he'd spoken to someone at a law office in Timmins. Terry had said the key was timing. Before the old man changes anything. I hadn't changed anything. I hadn't thought I needed to. My will left the house to Cynthia outright. My savings were split between Cynthia and a small bequest to my brother in Sault Ste. Marie. It was the same will I'd drawn up with Lorraine, updated once after she passed. I drove home that evening, made myself dinner, leftover soup, crackers, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time after. The thing about being 68 and alone is that you get very good at silence. You know the difference between the silence that means everything is fine and the silence that means something is coming. That night, The house was full of the second kind. I called my brother, Ray, in the salt, not to tell him everything. I didn't have words for it yet, but just to hear a familiar voice. "How's the knee?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "You sound tired." I said. "I've been thinking about the will." There was a pause. "Lorraine's been gone 3 years, Dawn. That's normal. I think I want to update it," I said. "I think I want to talk to someone." Ray didn't push. He never pushed. We talked about hockey for a while, and then I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. The next morning I drove to the office of a lawyer named Patricia Nault, who had handled our house purchase 20 years ago. I hadn't seen her in a decade, but her name was still on the door above Elgin Street, and when I walked in and explained who I was, she remembered me. I told her what Hazel had told me. I told her about the house, the will, my savings. I told her about Brad. She listened without interrupting, which was exactly what I needed. "What are you most concerned about?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "That's the problem." She explained some things to me. She explained what a power of attorney meant and what it could and couldn't do. She explained that my existing will was valid, but that there were steps I could take to make my intentions clearer, harder to challenge. She asked if I had ever signed anything I didn't fully understand. "Brad brought me some papers about 6 months ago," I said. "He said they were to do with Lorraine's estate, some loose end. I signed them." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember what the papers were?" He said it was a formality. She asked me to try to find a copy. I drove home and went through every drawer in the house. I found the papers in a manila folder in the filing cabinet in the spare room, tucked behind the hydro bills. I didn't understand most of the language, but I photographed every page with my phone and sent the photos to Patricia. She called me that same afternoon. "Donald," she said, and her tone was careful in the way that careful tones always mean something bad. "These papers appear to be the beginning of a process to transfer your enduring power of attorney to your son-in-law." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "He told me it was a formality," I said. "It wasn't," she said. "But here's the important thing. The process wasn't completed. This is only the first document. There would need to be additional steps, and those steps haven't happened. You still have time. Time to do what? To protect yourself," she said. I did not call Cynthia. I know that sounds cold. She was my daughter. She was the little girl I'd taught to skate on the rink behind the community center, the one who'd cried for 3 days when our dog died, the one who'd held my hand in the hospital while Lorraine was in surgery and told me it was going to be okay. But she'd kept her husband's name, and I wasn't sure yet what she knew. Patricia advised me to move carefully. Don't tip them off. Don't change anything visibly yet. Keep a record of everything. So I started keeping a record. I bought a small notebook from the Dollarama, and I kept it in my jacket pocket, and I wrote down every conversation, every visit, every comment Brad made. I noted dates and times. I wrote down what Hazel had told me, word for word, signed and dated. Brad called twice that week. He asked how I was feeling. He mentioned that the walk-in clinic on Larch Street was doing free cognitive assessments for seniors. He said he'd read that it was important for people at a certain stage of life to have those things on file. I wrote that down too. The following Saturday, Hazel came for the weekend. She was quiet when she arrived, more careful than usual, and I could tell she'd been watching the tension at home without having words for it. We made pancakes. We worked on a birdhouse she was building for a school project. After dinner, I sat her down and I told her, as simply as I could, that she had done the right thing telling me what she heard, that she wasn't in any trouble, that I was handling things. "Is Dad going to be mad?" she asked. "Not at you," I said. "Whatever happens, none of this is your fault." She nodded, and something in her face relaxed. "Grandpa," she said, "I have something else." She reached into her backpack and pulled out her tablet. She'd recorded it. Sitting in the basement, pretending to play a game on her tablet, she had held the microphone toward the heating vent that ran up to the deck above, and she had pressed record. The audio was muffled. There was wind, but it was there. Brad's voice and Terry's voice, clear enough at the important moments. Terry saying, "The old man won't fight it." Brad saying, "We just need to wait for the right moment," when he's not thinking straight. I sat with that tablet in my hands for a long time. Then I called Patricia. The week that followed was the strangest week of my life. I went about everything as normally as I could. I shoveled the driveway. I went to my Thursday morning coffee with the other guys from the mill. I ate supper at 6 and watched the news and went to bed at a reasonable hour. But in between, things were moving. Patricia connected me with a colleague who specialized in elder law. I met with the man, a quiet, precise person who wore the same kind of cardigan my father used to wear. And he walked me through my options. We updated my will. We established a power of attorney, but it went to Ray in the salt, not Cynthia, not Brad. We made it very clear in writing, with witnesses, that I was of sound mind and understood exactly what I was signing. I had a conversation with my credit union. I wasn't hiding money. I was organizing it, making sure the accounts were in order, that nothing could be touched without my knowledge, and I told Ray everything. He drove down from the Salt on a Thursday, and I made chili, and we sat at the kitchen table, and I laid it all out, the papers I'd signed, the recordings, the notebook, the lawyer's assessment. Ray listened the way he always listened, completely without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to know if Cynthia knew," I said. "And if she didn't, then I want to give her a chance to do the right thing. And if she did?" I looked out the window at the garden, covered in snow now. Lorraine had planted those rose bushes along the fence. In July, they were extraordinary. "Then I'll protect what Lorraine and I built," I said. "And I'll do it without apology." I called Cynthia the following Sunday. I asked her to come over, just her, and I told her not to tell Brad where she was going. There was a long silence on the phone. "Why?" she asked. "Because I need to talk to you about something important, and I need to know that you're listening as my daughter, not as his wife." She came. I hadn't seen her in 3 weeks. She looked tired. She sat at the kitchen table where she'd done homework for 12 years, and she wrapped both hands around the mug of tea I gave her, and she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I put the tablet on the table between us, and I played the recording. She didn't say anything for a long time after. "I didn't know about the papers you signed," she said finally. "I knew he'd been talking to Terry about the future, about what would happen with the house. He said he was just being practical." "Cynthia." "I know." Her voice cracked. "I know, Dad. Did you know about the law office in Timmins?" She looked up then. "What law office?" I told her. I watched her face as each piece landed, and I'd known that face for 43 years, and I believed what I saw in it. Shock. Then shame. Then something harder. "He was doing this without telling me," she said. "It looks that way." "And, Hazel." She stopped. "Hazel recorded this. She was protecting her grandfather," I said. "She's 9 years old and she understood what was happening better than some adults in this situation." Cynthia put her face in her hands. We sat there for a while. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a crow landed on the fence and sat there looking in through the kitchen window. "What do you need from me?" she said, and I heard in her voice that she meant it. "I need you to be honest about what you knew and when," I said. "With me and eventually with whoever needs to hear it. I need you to understand that this house and what's in it is what your mother and I spent our lives building, and it is not Brad's to plan around. And I need you to decide, not right now, but soon, whether you're going to be my daughter or his partner in this." She nodded. "I need some time," she said. "You have some," I said. "Not a lot." Brad showed up 2 days later, unannounced as usual. He knocked, then used the spare key Cynthia had, and I heard the door open while I was in the workshop. I let him come to me. He stood in the doorway of the workshop with his hands in his pockets, looking at the birdhouse Hazel and I had finished, sitting on the workbench waiting for paint. "Dawn," he said. "Got a minute?" "Sure," I said. I kept sanding. He talked about the weather for a bit. He asked about my knee. He mentioned the cognitive assessments again, very casually, said his colleague's father had found them useful. I kept sanding and I let him talk. Then he said, "I've been thinking about the house, about your future. I think we should have an honest conversation about your options." I set down the sandpaper. "All right," I said, "let's have an honest conversation." I looked at him steadily. I'm a millwright. I've been steadily looking at things that need fixing for 34 years. I know how to hold a gaze. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said. "I've updated my will. I've established a power of attorney with my brother in the Salt. Everything is documented and witnessed and on file." Brad's expression didn't change right away. Then something shifted behind his eyes. "I also know about the law office in Timmins," I said. "And I know about the papers you told me were a formality." He opened his mouth. "I also know what you said to Terry on the deck," I said. "About waiting for the right moment. About when I'm not thinking straight." The workshop was very quiet. I've spent the last 3 weeks making sure that there is no right moment, I said. Not for what you're planning. So if you came here to have an honest conversation, here it is. This house belongs to me. My savings belong to me. My decisions about my future belong to me. And if you take one more step in the direction you've been going, I will let my lawyer take the next step. Do you understand? He stood there for a long moment. Then he said, I think there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't, I said. I picked up the sandpaper again. You can see yourself out. The next few weeks were difficult in a way that's hard to describe. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no scene. It was quieter than that. And in some ways the quiet was worse. Brad told Cynthia that I had attacked him unprovoked. Cynthia called me, and I told her my side, and she said she needed more time. I gave her more time. Terry sent me an email that was carefully worded to sound reasonable. I forwarded it to Patricia. Hazel still came for her weekends, and she never once seemed uncertain about which side of this she was on. She helped me repaint the workshop door, and she ate 2 bowls of cereal, and she watched nature documentaries with me on Saturday nights. And when she hugged me goodbye, she held on an extra second, the way she'd done since she was small. Ray came down again and helped me install a new lock on the back door and replace the one that used the spare key. I got the cognitive assessment, not because Brad suggested it, but because I wanted it on record. I scored well. The doctor, a woman who didn't waste words, told me I was in excellent cognitive health for my age and for any age, frankly. I had that documented too. Cynthia made her decision 6 weeks after she sat at my kitchen table. She called me on a Saturday morning, early, before I'd had my coffee. She said she'd spoken to a family counselor, without Brad at first, and then with him. She said she'd learned things about the conversations Brad had been having with Terry that she hadn't known about before. He was further along than I thought, she said. He'd actually had 2 conversations with that lawyer. He was looking at a way to have you assessed as unable to manage your own affairs. I didn't say anything. He told me he was being protective, she said. He actually used that word. How did that land? I asked. Not well, she said quietly. She asked me if I would consider coming to a session with her and the counselor. Not to reconcile with Brad. That wasn't what she was asking. She wanted me to hear from her, in a structured setting, what she knew and what she hadn't known, so that the record between us was clear. I said yes. We went the following Thursday. The counselor's office was in a low building on Regent Street, plants in every corner, box of tissues on the table. Cynthia told me everything in order, precisely, and I believed her. She hadn't known about the Timmons lawyer. She hadn't known about the papers I'd signed. She'd known Brad was keeping an eye on things, as he'd put it to her, but she'd taken that at face value because she'd wanted to. I should have paid more attention, she said. I should have asked you directly, and I'm sorry. I'm not a man who cries easily. I've cried 3 times as an adult. When Hazel was born, when Lorraine was diagnosed, and when Lorraine died. I didn't cry in that office, but it was close. I need you to be my daughter, I said. That's all I've ever needed. I know, Dad, she said. Brad moved out of their house in Hanmer in early April. He and Cynthia separated. And though neither of them has said the word divorce yet, I think they both know where things are going. Cynthia is staying in the house with Hazel for now. She's gone back to work. She'd taken a few years off, and she's picking up her bookkeeping work again, building back some of her own footing. I helped her move some furniture around in the 2nd bedroom to make it feel more like her own space. We had lunch after, soup from the same pot I'd made the night. Hazel told me what she'd heard, and we talked about the summer, about whether Hazel's soccer team would make it to regionals, about the roses along the fence at my place that would be blooming by July. Terry I haven't spoken to. I don't expect to. The house on Elm Ridge Road is still mine. The workshop is mine. The garden Lorraine planted is mine to tend for as many years as I have left. My will says what I want it to say, witnessed and on file, and the right people know where to find it. Hazel won first place at her school's science fair in March. She built a model of a wind turbine and explained how it generated electricity and what that meant for communities in the north. The teacher said she presented with a lot of confidence. She called to tell me about it. I could hear her grinning through the phone. I knew you'd win, I told her. You always say that, because it's always true. She laughed, and I stood in the kitchen on Elm Ridge Road, with the phone against my ear and the afternoon light coming through, the window, the way it always does in March, when the snow is still on the ground, but the sun has started to mean something again. And I thought about what it means to have someone in your corner who is 9 years old and absolutely fearless. Lorraine would have been so proud of her. She would have been proud of all of us, I think, for getting through it the way we did. Not perfectly, not without pain, but with the important things still standing. The roses will bloom again in July. I intend to be there to see them.